My name is Daniel Price. I was born and raised in a small Pennsylvania town called Coldwater Hollow, the kind of place that barely appears on maps and only gets attention when deer season opens. I left after high school, college, city job, the usual escape story. But last spring, I came back. My mother had a stroke and my sister couldn't handle the house alone. So I moved home, thinking it would just be for a few months. I thought I'd manage the property, get Mom settled, maybe even clear the old shed out back before heading back to Philadelphia. I didn't expect that coming home would wake something I'd forgotten, something everyone here still talks about in hushed voices. Every small town has its story, the one that parents use to keep kids from staying out too late. Ours was called the Hollow Man. Supposedly, he was a hermit who lived deep in the woods east of Miller's Creek in the 1950s. People said he watched the town from the tree line and came out only when someone trespassed too far into his part of the forest. If you ignored the boundary stones, you'd disappear. Kids used to dare each other to cross them. 3 big limestone markers sunk into the ground on the old logging road, and no one ever admitted to going farther. The grown-ups always said those markers were cursed, but the older folks just said to leave that side of the creek alone. No one ever said why. When I was 10, I rode my bike out there with my friends Tyler and Beck. We found the stones, just mossy, weathered blocks, and we threw rocks at them, laughing, trying to be brave. Beck swore he saw someone watching us from the trees. I didn't believe it, of course. That was 20 years ago. Still, when I moved back last spring, the first thing I noticed was that people still avoided that side of town. Even in daylight, you never saw anyone crossing the bridge at the edge of the old logging road. It was as if the whole town had decided to pretend that area didn't exist. The first few weeks home were quiet. I helped my mother through rehab, fixed a leaking roof, and tried not to let the silence of the valley bother me. You forget how empty rural towns sound at night. No cars, no sirens, just the ticking of the house and the wind through the trees. But one evening, after a thunderstorm rolled through, I noticed something strange out past the back field. The creek had risen high enough to swallow the trail, and along the far bank I saw the shape of something pale, half buried in the mud. It looked like stone, a square edge maybe 2 feet high with moss clinging to it. I didn't think much of it then, just figured it was a chunk of old farm foundation or debris washed down by the storm. But the next day, when I mentioned it to our neighbour, Mr. Doherty, who's lived here since the 60s, his face changed. He didn't even let me finish before saying, "Don't touch it, Danny. Leave whatever's out there alone." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but his tone was dead serious. "I'm telling you, boy, don't cross that creek. That's the Hollow Man's ground." He said it the same way people talk about property lines, like it was a matter of fact. That night, I couldn't get his words out of my head. It's one thing to hear a legend as a kid. It's another to see a grown man still afraid of it decades later. So I went back out the next morning with my camera and boots. The creek was lower now and I could cross without getting soaked. Sure enough, there it was, a weathered limestone block, almost perfectly square, half buried. It had a rough carving on one side, maybe initials, but the years had eroded it beyond recognition. The ground nearby looked disturbed, like something had shifted recently. Maybe the storm had loosened the soil. I snapped a few photos and brushed some moss away with my hand. Beneath it, the surface wasn't stone at all, it was metal, rusted pitted but metal. The shape was still blocky, but I could see faint seams along the side, like a panel bolted shut. My first thought was that it might have been an old power junction box from when the mill ran out here. So naturally I kept poking around. The mud was soft, and after a few minutes I managed to uncover what looked like a small vent grill along the top edge. A faint smell of rot drifted out when I pressed near it, damp, earthy like wet leaves that had been sitting for years. I remember thinking it was odd that I hadn't noticed the smell from a distance. When I got home, I sent the pictures to Tyler, he's a surveyor now, and asked if he'd ever come across anything like it. He called me back almost immediately. "Where the hell did you take those?" I told him, near the creek behind my mother's place. He was quiet for a long moment before saying, "That's the boundary, man. That's where the markers are. You shouldn't be digging that up." I laughed it off, but his voice had that nervous edge I hadn't heard since we were kids. He told me to cover it back up, to let it breathe on its own. I had no idea what he meant by that, and before I could ask, he hung up. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept hearing water dripping somewhere, though it wasn't raining. Around 2 a.m., I got up to check the kitchen, thinking maybe the sink was leaking. When I stepped onto the porch, the air was heavy and still. No frogs, no crickets, just silence. From the field, I could see the faint gleam of the creek reflecting the moonlight, and something else. A thin line of fog clung to the water, low and unmoving. At first I thought it was just mist, but when I looked harder, I realized it formed a near-perfect straight edge across the far bank, exactly where that block had been. I shut the door and told myself it was just my imagination. The next morning, though, the smell was stronger. Even from the porch I could catch whiffs of that same earthy rot. It seemed impossible for it to drift that far. Out of curiosity, or maybe stubbornness, I went back out again. The block looked unchanged, but the vent was now half exposed, like something had pushed up from underneath. The soil around it was cracked, as though it had been heated from below. I crouched and pressed my ear close. For a moment I could have sworn I heard something faint, like a metallic creak or air moving through pipes. That was enough for me. I stood, covered it with whatever branches and mud I could find, and left. I didn't even take more pictures. I figured I'd talk to the county later, maybe report it as a potential hazard. On the walk back, though, I noticed something else. There were fresh footprints on my side of the creek. Bare footprints. They led from the waterline halfway up the bank before stopping abruptly, as if whoever made them had just vanished mid-step. I told myself it was a trick of the mud, maybe deer prints eroded by rain, but the pattern was too human, too deliberate. I followed them back down to the water, trying to see if they crossed anywhere. But they didn't. They just ended there, pointing toward my house. That night, the silence came again, heavier than before. Even the wind seemed to stop. Around midnight, there was a soft clatter outside, like stones knocking together. When I opened the curtains, the motion light flicked on. Nothing moved. But along the edge of the field, right by the creek, something white caught the light. For a second, I thought it was just another limestone rock. Then I realized it was standing upright. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't go outside to check. I barely slept. Every few minutes, I'd hear that faint knocking sound again. Stone against stone, slow and irregular, like someone testing rhythm in the dark. When the sun finally came up, I went straight outside, half expecting to find something obvious. Broken branches, tracks, maybe a fallen tree. But the field looked untouched. The only thing out of place was the mud on the porch steps, a single bare footprint, half-dried, facing the house. I crouched down and stared at it for a long time. It wasn't large, maybe the size of my own, but the shape was unmistakably human. I pressed my boot beside it for comparison. The print was too clean, too precise to have been made by someone running. Whoever, or whatever, had left it had been standing still, right there on the first step, looking at my front door. I told myself it must have been some local kid playing a prank. The story of the Hollow Man had floated around for decades after all, and news travels fast when an outsider, especially one who used to live here, starts poking around old legends. But deep down I knew that explanation didn't quite fit. Kids these days didn't even know the full story. They'd heard whispers, sure, but not the details. Only the older folks kept those tucked away. Still, I decided to put it behind me. I had things to do, get groceries, check on Mum, fix the gutters before the next rain. By the time I got back that afternoon, the air had turned thick with humidity. Thunder rolled far off, hidden somewhere beyond the ridge. I tried to ignore the feeling crawling up my spine as I unloaded the car. When I looked across the field, the fog had returned, even though the temperature was in the mid-80s. It wasn't drifting or swirling like normal fog. It sat there like a wall, perfectly still. I couldn't help myself. Curiosity is a dangerous thing when you're alone long enough. I grabbed my boots again, crossed the grass, and headed toward the creek. The smell hit me before I even reached it, a mix of stagnant water and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. The block was still covered, but the mud around it had cracked wider, small fissures spreading outward in a spiderweb pattern. The vent was completely exposed now. When I leaned closer, I could hear it again, that soft creaking, like something shifting deep underground. It wasn't constant, more like the occasional groan of an old ship hull under pressure. I squinted, thinking maybe there was a pipe connected beneath the soil, but the sound had an odd rhythm to it. A pause, a long inhale, then another faint groan, almost like breath passing through metal. I took a step back. The fog behind me had moved closer, impossible but true. It hugged the creek's edge, stretching farther than before. I could barely see the opposite bank now. My chest tightened, a primitive kind of warning, the kind that says leave now before you think twice. So I did. When I got home, I washed the mud off and tried to call Tyler again. He didn't pick up. I left a voicemail, trying not to sound as uneasy as I felt. You know, about that thing by the creek, it's not just stone. It's venting, I think. You ever seen old utility tunnels out here? Could be a hazard. No response. Around 6, I went to check on my mother. She was doing better that week, sitting up and watching the news when I arrived. But the moment I mentioned the smell from the creek, her eyes hardened. "You went over there?" she asked, voice sharper than I'd heard in months. "Danny, you don't go east of the bridge, not now." "Not ever." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's not haunted. It's probably just an old drain line or something." Her hand shot out and gripped mine with surprising strength. "That ground doesn't belong to anyone anymore," she said. "People tried to build there, long before you were born. Every time they had to stop." I asked her why. She didn't answer. She just turned back toward the window, jaw set tight. I didn't push it. Driving home, the storm finally broke. Rain came down hard, pelting the windshield like gravel. I had to slow to a crawl once I hit the bridge. The fog was even thicker now, swirling in slow, unnatural coils over the creek. Our wipers couldn't cut through it fast enough. And just before I crossed, my headlights caught something. 2 faint shapes standing on the far side of the guardrail. At first, I thought they were trees, but they were too close together, too symmetrical. 2 tall, pale columns side by side, then one of them moved. I hit the gas. When I reached my driveway, I sat there for a long time, engine idling, rain hammering the roof. Every instinct screamed to look back, to check the road, but I couldn't. I just turned off the car, locked the doors, and waited for the storm to pass. It didn't. By midnight, the power went out. I lit a candle and sat by the window watching lightning flash over the valley. Each strike illuminated the field for half a second, and every time I expected to see someone standing there. The fog hadn't lifted. It was clinging to the ground in thick patches, glowing faintly white in the flashes of light. At one point, I thought I saw movement near the fence line, a figure, low and slow, crawling instead of walking. I blinked and it was gone. But a moment later, something clattered against the siding. I froze, listening. Then another sound, a single, deliberate knock against the back door. Not thunder. Wait, 3 slow knocks. I didn't move. My phone battery was nearly dead, and there was no signal anyway. I sat there, gripping the candle, waiting for the sound again. But it didn't come. When the next flash of lightning lit the kitchen, I thought I saw a smear of mud across the glass. 3 lines, as if someone had dragged their fingers down the window. The rain eased by dawn, though the fog stayed. I barely remember falling asleep. When I woke up, the power was still out, and the house smelled faintly of wet earth. On the back steps, I found another footprint, smaller than before, pressed deep into the mud, and beside it, a smear of rust-coloured water leading toward the creek. That was when I decided to call the sheriff. He arrived around noon, a man named Jansen, who used to coach Little League back when I was a kid. He looked tired, wary, like someone who already knew too much. I showed him the footprint, the vent, even the photos I'd taken. He didn't say much, just looked at the ground for a while before finally speaking. "You uncovered one of the markers," he said quietly. "We've been trying to keep those sealed since the flood back in '84. What's inside them?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not our business anymore. That didn't sit right with me. Come on, Sheriff. If it's leaking gas or there's old equipment under there, someone could get hurt." He looked at me then, and there was something almost like pity in his eyes. "That's not the kind of hurt you can fix, son. Cover it back up. Don't go near it again." Before he left, he said one more thing that I can't shake. "If you hear the knocking again, don't answer. Just stay inside till morning." I didn't go outside to check. I spent the rest of that day doing what Sheriff Jansen told me to do, pretending nothing had happened. I covered the marker again, packed some soil over it, and even threw a few rotting branches on top to hide the outline. The rain had softened the ground, and my boots sank with every step, pulling at the mud like it didn't want to let go. By late afternoon, the sky had cleared. You could almost believe the whole thing had been a bad dream if not for the smell. It was weaker now, but it still hung in the air. Faint, metallic, impossible to ignore. When the wind shifted, it blew straight toward the house. I tried to distract myself with normal things. I cleaned the kitchen. I fixed the leaky gutter. I even called a contractor about installing motion cameras near the field, pretending it was just for animal control. Anything to make the house feel like a place people still lived in. Then the phone rang. It was Tyler. His voice sounded off, hoarse, like he hadn't slept. "You talked to Jansen, didn't you?" he said. "Yeah," I replied. "He told me to cover it up and forget about it." "You want to tell me what the hell that thing is?" There was a pause. "Then you remember Beck?" I froze. Of course I remember Beck. He was the 3rd kid from that long-ago summer, the one who'd said he saw someone watching us from the trees. I hadn't thought about him in years. He'd moved out west after high school, worked oil rigs, sent postcards once in a while. "Why?" I asked. "Beck came back last fall," Tyler said. "He was talking about building on his family's land near the creek. Said he wanted to put a cabin where the markers used to be. I told him not to." He laughed. "What happened?" He disappeared. For a second, all I heard was static. Then Tyler added quietly, "They found his truck by the old bridge. Doors locked, no keys." Nothing else. I didn't know what to say. After a moment, he continued, "Danny, those markers weren't just legends. They were boundary stones. When they put the mill in back in the 40s, they hit something underground, some kind of tunnel system from the old mine days. The town sealed it off, called it condemned land. But people started hearing things afterward. Voices, knocks. The story about the Hollow Man came later. To keep kids away, just don't go near it again, all right?" The line went dead before I could ask more. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. The whole town had built its peace around not asking questions. That thought scared me more than anything else. As dusk fell, the fog came back. It rolled low across the field, like a tide coming in slow motion. The air turned still, heavy with moisture. I turned off the porch light, thinking maybe if the house looked dark, whatever was out there would pass by. I was wrong. Around 10, the knocking started again. Soft this time. 3 knocks, slow and even, at the same rhythm as before. It came from the back door, not the front. I sat perfectly still at the table, every nerve in my body straining toward that sound. After the 3rd knock, silence. Then the faint crunch of gravel, like footsteps circling the side of the house. I blew out the candle and waited. The sound moved to the front porch. 3 knocks again, louder this time. Then nothing. I wanted to call someone, Jansen, Tyler, anyone, but I couldn't bring myself to move. Every instinct said that if I did, I'd draw attention to where I was. I don't know how long I sat there. At some point, I heard something even worse, the slow creak of the screen door. My breath caught. I counted to 10, then 20. When I finally looked up, lightning flashed outside, and for a split second, I saw a shape through the window, tall, narrow, and utterly still. It wasn't standing close enough for me to make out details, but I could see its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if listening. The flash ended, and darkness swallowed everything again. I don't remember moving, but somehow I ended up in the hallway, crouched low with a kitchen knife in my hand. The silence pressed against me like weight. I couldn't even hear the rain anymore. Then came a different sound, a dull, distant clang, like metal echoing under the ground. It wasn't from the door. It came from outside near the creek. That was somehow worse. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the back window. Across the field, the fog was alive with movement. Not fast, not chaotic, just shifting, as if something beneath it was breathing. Then a faint glow rose from the direction of the marker. Not bright, not natural. More like the orange of rust catching light from deep below. I should have stayed inside. I know that now. But in that moment, the need to see overrode everything else. I stepped out, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air hit me like a wall of wet earth. The fog curled around my legs, swallowing the beam of light. Halfway across the field, the smell returned. Stronger now, almost chemical. My eyes watered. I pressed my sleeve over my nose and kept going until I reached the creek. The ground was trembling. Not shaking like an earthquake, just a steady pulse, like something large and mechanical turning slowly far beneath the soil. The marker was fully uncovered again. The branches I'd piled over it were scattered. The vent cover was gone. In its place was a dark, open slit in the earth. Air rushed from it in short bursts, each one followed by that same metallic groan. And somewhere deep below, I thought I heard water moving. I crouched beside it, trying to aim the flashlight down the gap, but the beam barely reached a few feet before hitting dense mist. There was definitely a hollow space down there, though, big enough to echo. I could see faint condensation gathering around the rim of the vent, like breath on glass. Then faint but clear, came the sound of knocking, 3 times, slow and deliberate. This time from inside the vent. I stumbled back so fast I nearly fell into the creek. My flashlight slipped and rolled into the mud, beams slicing across the fog. That's when I saw the footprints again, bare, deep, fresh. Not leading toward the vent this time, but away from it. Toward my house, I didn't even think. I ran. By the time I reached the porch, my lungs were burning. The door was still shut. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. I slammed it behind me and locked every latch I could find. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I finally sat down, trying to catch my breath, I realized I could still hear the knocking, but faintly, now coming from under the floorboards. 3 times, a pause. Then 3 again. It stopped just before dawn. I didn't go outside to check. When morning finally came, the silence felt heavier than the noise had. No birds, no wind, not even the drip of water from the eaves. The kind of silence that feels like the world is waiting for you to make the first mistake. I didn't move for a long time. My back ached from sleeping in the chair by the window, knife still clutched in my hand. The light coming through the glass was thin and grey, barely touching the floorboards. For a while I convinced myself that maybe it had all been some half-dream. But the muddy footprints inside the kitchen said otherwise. They started by the back door and ended right beneath the table. One perfect outline of a bare heel and 4 toes. I could see the faint imprint of the 5th, like whoever or whatever had stood there had been patient enough to settle their weight fully before moving on. That broke something in me. I called Sheriff Johnson again, straight to voicemail. I left one message, short and tight. It's inside. Please call back. I thought about driving into town, but part of me didn't trust the road anymore. The bridge, the fog, it all felt like a trap, waiting to reset the moment I crossed it. Instead, I decided to go down to the crawl space under the house. If the knocking had been real, that's where it would have come from. I grabbed a flashlight, a mask, and my old crowbar. The hatch to the crawl space was behind the laundry room, half hidden under a rug. When I pulled it open, the smell of damp earth poured out like breath. My skin prickled instantly. The beam of my flashlight cut through dust and cobwebs. There wasn't much clearance, just enough room to crouch and shuffle. The ground was packed soil, darker in places where water had seeped through. I crawled halfway in before noticing something strange. The dirt wasn't solid anymore. Near the center, a section looked freshly disturbed, soft and uneven, like someone had dug there recently and covered it back up. The sound came again then, 3 knocks, faint but clear, right beneath me. I froze. The air shifted slightly like a current moving upward. My flashlight flickered. Then the soil beneath my palm gave way and my hand plunged into empty space. I jerked back fast enough to hit my head on a beam. The hole wasn't large, maybe the size of a dinner plate, but there was a void beneath it, deep and hollow. I shone the light down. The beam disappeared into darkness. Something gleamed at the edge of the hole, metal, rusted and ridged like pipework. Not natural, not roots, a tunnel. The same kind of structure I'd seen by the creek. The smell of rot and rust was stronger here, nearly chemical. I backed out, slamming the hatch shut and dragging the washing machine over it. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I tried to dial my phone again. No signal. It was barely noon, but the fog had started creeping back across the field. I could see it from the window, thick as smoke, rolling in from the creek bed. For the first time I noticed the pattern. It wasn't spreading evenly. It was following something. A faint, straight line that led directly from the creek to my house. That's when I realized it wasn't fog at all. It was vapor. The vent was releasing gas or air from below ground, and it was leaking through connected spaces, through the tunnel, through the crawl space.
Straight up toward me. I didn't stop to think.
I grabbed a tarp from the shed and started sealing the windows and doors as if that would help. The smell was inside already, a sour metallic edge that made my tongue taste blood. By late afternoon, I saw movement in the fog again. Not shapes this time, just the suggestion of them. Pockets of shadow that shifted when I looked away, then held still when I stared.
My vision was playing tricks, or maybe the vapor was getting to me.
Either way, I felt watched. I tried calling Tyler again. This time, he answered. "Danny," he said before I could speak, "listen to me. You need to get out of the house." "Right now, I can't," I said. "The bridge? I don't care about the bridge. Drive anywhere else. Those tunnels run under the entire East Bank. The old mill vented through them. When the mine collapsed, they pumped sealing concrete down there, but some of it didn't set right. It's toxic, man. It leaks methane and God knows what else. The knocks you're hearing, it's the pressure equalizing. Those vents open when the ground shifts." I wanted to believe him.
I really did.
It made sense. Mechanical, logical. But it didn't explain the footprints. It didn't explain the door creaking open at night. "Tyler," I said quietly, "there's something under my house." There was silence on the line. Then he said, "It's not supposed to be active anymore." "What's not?" "The air system. It wasn't for ventilation, it was for containment." The call dropped. My stomach turned to ice. Containment. Outside, the fog had reached the porch steps. I could see it curling around the railing, slow and deliberate. Then beneath the hum of the air, I heard it again. 3 knocks. Not from below this time, but from the side of the house. And 3 more on the opposite wall. The pattern circled, each set a few seconds apart, like someone testing the perimeter. I backed into the kitchen and grabbed the crowbar again. The knock stopped. Then came a single long drag across the siding.
Nails or metal scraping wood from one end of the wall to the other. I don't know what possessed me.
But I went to the window and yanked the curtain aside. The fog pressed right against the glass. For a moment I saw my own reflection, warped and pale. Then something moved behind it. Something tall, nearly human-shaped, its outline rippling like heat distortion. It leaned close enough that the condensation on the glass shivered.
I stumbled back and the figure faded into the mist. The smell was unbearable now, sharp enough to sting my eyes.
I ran to the door, fumbling with the lock. My hand slipped on the knob. It was slick, as if coated in sweat. When I yanked it open, the fog rolled inside like a living thing. I couldn't see more than 2 feet ahead. My porch light flickered once, then died. Somewhere out in the white I heard footsteps. Slow, steady, approaching. My own voice sounded strange when I shouted, echoing off nothing. "Who's there?" No answer, just the sound of water dripping. Then the knocks again, this time on the inside of the door I'd just opened. I slammed it shut, heart pounding so hard it hurt. My knees gave out and I slid to the floor, listening to the wood vibrate with each slow thud. 3 knocks. A pause, 3 more, then nothing. I stayed there until my phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from an unknown number.
It said only one thing, ceiling, no name.
No context. But I did as it said. I dragged every heavy piece of furniture I could find against the door, piled it high until the entrance vanished behind a wall of wood and metal. By the time I finished, it was dark again. The fog outside pulsed faintly, glowing in time with something deep underground. By the time full dark set in, the fog outside wasn't fog anymore. It was thicker, greyer, almost oily, and it clung to the windows like something alive. The pulse beneath the ground hadn't stopped. Every few seconds the floor trembled, faint but steady, like a heartbeat echoing through the soil. I sat on the kitchen floor, back against the fridge, crowbar across my lap. The barricade at the door looked ridiculous now. Chairs, a cabinet, even the small dining table flipped on its side. But it made me feel better, or at least it kept me from staring too long at the windows. I kept thinking about that text. Seal it. Whoever sent it knew what was happening. Maybe it was Tyler, maybe Jansen, maybe someone else entirely. The message had no timestamp, no reply option. Just that one word. Around 9, my phone buzzed again, faint and broken. A new text. It breathes through heat vents. Shut 'em. The heater hadn't been on in weeks. Still, I didn't question it. I moved through the house with my flashlight, sealing every floor vent I could find, stuffing them with towels, duct tape, even trash bags. The air inside felt heavy, but cleaner somehow once I'd blocked the last one. That's when the knocking started again. This time, it wasn't on the walls. It came from inside the ductwork. 3 sharp hits vibrating through the metal, moving room to room as if following me. When I reached the living room, the sound was directly below the floor. I crouched, pressing my ear to the vent. Something shifted in the dark metal. Then a slow exhale, so faint it barely stirred the dust. I jerked back and sealed that vent too. My pulse hammered against my skull. Whatever was under the house, it wasn't air. It was moving. I ran to the breaker box and killed the main power, just in case. The house plunged into silence. For a few minutes, nothing happened. I started to believe maybe the noise was just pressure from the underground lines, or maybe methane gas escaping pockets in the soil. I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Then the phone rang. The old landline on the wall, silent for years, began to ring. One long tone, then another. I didn't even remember leaving it plugged in. Against every bit of reason, I picked it up. "Daniel?" a voice said. It was low, ragged, like someone speaking through grit. "Who is this?" "Don't stay inside. There's venting under the foundation." "Who are you?" I asked again. The line crackled. I could hear faint static underneath, but it wasn't random. It had rhythm, 3 slow pulses, a pause. Then 3 again, the same pattern. Then the voice returned, "Weaker now. Seal it or burn it." The line went dead. I stood there, holding the receiver, listening to the empty hum. "Burn it? Burn what?" "The vents? The marker? The whole property?" The smell was back, stronger than ever. The metallic tang had deepened into something thick and sweet, like rotting fruit mixed with chemicals. My eyes watered. I could almost taste it. I opened a window just an inch to get air, but the fog outside pushed inward like pressure against glass. When I closed it again, the sound of movement came from the crawl space. Slow scraping, like soil, shifting under weight. Then faintly, I heard my name. Daniel. It wasn't loud. It was whispered, muffled by layers of dirt and wood, but it was unmistakably human. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. My flashlight flickered again, the beam cutting across the kitchen and catching the hatch in the corner, the one I'd sealed earlier beneath the washing machine. It was trembling slightly. Dust was falling from the edges, one slow vibration at a time. Every part of me said, "Don't look." But I couldn't stop. I crouched and pressed my ear against the floor. Beneath the boards, I heard a voice, so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. "Help me." The words came with a wet sound, like someone speaking through water. "Beck." I whispered before I even realized what I'd said. No answer. Just another slow scrape, closer this time. Then, almost tenderly, "Open it!" I bolted upright and dragged the heaviest thing I could find, an old dresser, on top of the hatch. My arms shook so hard I nearly dropped it. Then I sat down beside it, breathing through my shirt, trying not to panic. I thought of the sheriff's face that morning, the look of pity when he'd said not our business anymore. He knew they all did. Whatever had been sealed in those tunnels wasn't just gas. It was something worse, something the town had decided was easier to bury than fix. I don't know how long I sat there before I noticed the temperature dropping. My breath started to fog. Condensation beaded along the kitchen tiles, running in thin rivulets toward the drain like the house itself was sweating. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, pacing from one room to the next. Each step made the ceiling creak, moving toward the staircase that led down to me. I gripped the crowbar tighter, forcing myself to breathe. Whoever it was had somehow gotten in while every door and window was sealed. The steps reached the top of the stairs and stopped. "Daniel." The same voice again, soft, patient. I turned off the flashlight. The dark pressed in close. The next sound was the slow drag of something heavy against the banister. Then another step, lower now. The faintest outline of movement appeared in the hall, a pale reflection caught in the dim light leaking through the curtains. I backed into the corner, trying to stay quiet. The figure reached the bottom step and paused. I could hear its breathing now, steady, slow, human. Then the power flickered back on. The lights blazed for half a second. There was no one there. But the hatch in the floor was open. The dresser I'd shoved on top of it had been pushed aside like it weighed nothing. Cold air poured up from below, carrying the smell of rust and rot. I dropped the crowbar and slammed the hatch shut, throwing my full weight on top of it. The wood groaned beneath me. From below 3 knocks, then silence. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat against the wall until dawn, staring at that hatch, waiting for it to move again. It didn't. When the first light crept through the fog, I went outside. The air was heavy still. The fog was finally thinning, revealing the field and the creek beyond it. The marker was gone. Nothing but a wide, sunken hole remained, ringed by disturbed soil and a thin layer of black residue that shimmered like oil. The vent had collapsed. Whatever was under there had finally opened up. In the center of the hole, half buried in the mud, something caught the light. I crouched and brushed it off. A phone, mud-caked, cracked, but still lit. The wallpaper was a photo I recognized instantly. Beck, Tyler, and me, 12 years old, covered in dirt, grinning at the edge of Miller's Creek. The battery icon blinked once, then died. Behind me, the wind shifted, carrying that same metallic scent. It came from the direction of my house. The wind didn't move right that morning. It carried no sound, no rustle from the trees, no creak from the porch, not even birdsong. It only carried that smell, metallic, wet, wrong. From the field, the house looked smaller than I remembered. Every window reflected the pale sky like empty eyes.
I wanted to believe the stench was from the collapsed vent, that it was just chemical runoff, methane, decay. But something in me knew better.
The smell wasn't coming from the creek anymore. It was coming from inside. I crossed the yard slowly, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. The grass was slick underfoot, damp from the fog that hadn't burned off yet. When I reached the porch, the boards felt softer than usual. The air under the eaves was cooler, denser. I hesitated with my hand on the knob. waiting for the familiar creak of the doorframe. Nothing. The door swung open like it had been expecting me. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with that same faint hum I'd been hearing under the floorboards. Every surface looked damp. The kitchen light flickered weakly, fed by a power line that should have been cut. The hatch was still shut, but the boards around it were warped, slightly raised, as if the soil underneath had swelled during the night. I tried calling Tyler again. This time, the line picked up immediately, but all I heard was static. Then beneath it, the same 3 knocks spaced evenly apart. I hung up before the 4th. I needed proof, something I could show Jansen, something to make this all tangible. I grabbed my camera from the counter and aimed it toward the floor. The lens fogged instantly, moisture condensing inside the glass. I wiped it with my sleeve, but the haze wouldn't clear. A faint vibration trembled through the floorboards again, rising from deep below. Then came the sound that froze me cold. It wasn't knocking this time. It was tapping, quick, precise, rhythmic, the kind of sound a metal tool makes when it strikes hollow ground. It moved in a pattern, 3 taps, pause, 2, pause, 3 again, like someone working methodically beneath the floor, dismantling something piece by piece. I knelt beside the hatch and put my ear to the wood. A faint voice drifted through the vibration.
I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of speech, low and deliberate.
For one horrible second I thought I recognized the cadence.
The temperature dropped.
My breath fogged the air. I stepped back, the boards creaking under my weight. That's when I saw the hairline crack, running along the kitchen tiles, right above the crawl space. It widened as I watched, splitting the grout in a jagged line from the wall to the center of the floor. A thin wisp of air hissed through it. I grabbed duct tape, plastic sheeting, anything I could find, and pressed it over the gap. The hiss quieted but didn't stop. My pulse thudded so loud I could barely hear anything else. I should have left then. Driven away, walked, run, anything. But part of me needed to know what was beneath that house, what my town had buried. Curiosity has always been stronger than fear for me. The crawl space hatch groaned once. Then again. Then the lock snapped clean off. The door didn't fly open. It simply lifted an inch, like something underneath was testing the air. I bolted for the back door, but the air inside the house changed again, growing thick and hot like steam.
My skin prickled.
The hum under the floor rose to a steady vibration, deep enough to rattle the glass in the cupboards. The smell turned sweet again, suffocating, almost floral now. Then the lights went out. Darkness, pure, suffocating. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then died. In the blackness, I heard the voice again.
Closer this time, clearer. Daniel, it didn't echo from below anymore.
It came from the hallway, 10 feet away. I pressed myself against the wall, trying not to breathe. The voice came again, softer. Daniel,
help me. It sounded exactly like Beck. The same tone, the same hitch in his voice when he was nervous. I swallowed hard. Beck, silence.
Then, it's open. The air behind me shifted and I turned just in time to see the hatch slowly, smoothly lift itself.
A gust of damp air rolled out, cold enough to sting my face.
The smell hit me full force, earth, rust, and something else, something organic. Something was down there. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it move, slow, wet. I backed toward the door, but the floor flexed under my weight. A groan came from beneath, like timbers straining under pressure. Then a crack. The tile split wider, and I saw black mud seeping through, bubbling like tar. I ran. The screen door slammed behind me as I stumbled onto the porch, gasping in the open air. The fog had thinned, but it wasn't gone. It lingered low, hugging the ground in swirling patches. I could see the faint shimmer of moisture rising from the soil, spreading outward from the house like a breath expanding. I turned toward the road and froze. There was a figure standing by the fence line, too far to see clearly, but tall, still facing me. It didn't move, didn't sway with the breeze, just stood there as if waiting for something. "Beck,"
I shouted. No answer.
The figure tilted its head slightly, the same unnatural angle I'd seen in the reflection days ago. Then I heard a new sound behind me, the front door creaking open again. The house exhaled, a deep, wet sigh. I looked back and saw steam rising through the doorway. Not smoke, vapor. Inside, the air shimmered like heat above asphalt. The hum had turned to a roar, low and pulsing. I didn't think. I ran for the truck. The keys were still in the ignition. The engine sputtered once, then caught. I threw it into gear and hit the gas. The tires spun in the wet grass before gripping, flinging mud behind me. I didn't look back until I hit the gravel road. From that distance, the house looked like it was breathing. The walls seemed to flex in and out, the windows fogging and clearing in slow rhythm. A faint orange light pulsed from beneath it, steady, alive. Then the roof sagged just slightly, a soft collapse inward, like a lung deflating. I drove until the road met the main highway, until I saw the Coldwater Hollow sign disappear in my rearview mirror. Only then did I pull over, heart hammering, chest aching. When I checked my phone, a new text had appeared.
No number again.
Just one line. You shouldn't have opened it. The timestamp was blank. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and drove another 20 miles before stopping at a diner just outside town. The waitress took one look at me, mud-soaked, shaking, and poured coffee without asking. I told her the power line at my mum's place had blown, that I'd smelled gas, that I thought there might have been a leak. She nodded slowly like she'd heard it before. "You're not the first one to say that," she murmured. "Folks up there always come down talking about smells and sounds. Must be something in that soil." I asked if she'd ever heard of the Hollow Man. She froze mid-pour. "Don't go calling it that," she said quietly. "That's just what people say when they don't know what's underneath." "Then what's underneath?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to the window toward the hills beyond town. "You've already seen it, haven't you?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed one last time. Another text. This one from a saved contact, Sheriff Jansen. "We're closing off Miller's Creek. Do not go back. Whatever's venting under your house, reach the old tunnels. It's spreading." I looked outside again. In the distance, over the ridgeline, a faint haze was rising, grey, shimmering like fog caught in sunlight. Only this time, it wasn't fog. By noon, the haze over the ridge had thickened into a pale column, twisting slow as it rose. The diner's windows rattled every so often, a low vibration that made the silverware hum. Nobody else in the room spoke about it, but everyone noticed. The waitress kept glancing outside, lips pressed thin. I stayed just long enough to steady my hands. The caffeine didn't help. It only made the tremor sharper. When I paid, she slipped the check under the plate without a word. But as I stood to leave, she said quietly, "If you go back, don't cross the bridge on foot." I didn't ask what she meant. By the time I reached the main road again, sheriff's cruisers had blocked the turnoff to Miller's Creek. 2 deputies waved me down, masks over their faces. Behind them a sign read, "Hazard, gas venting area, do not enter." I rolled down my window. "I live past that road," I said. The younger deputy shook his head.
"Not anymore you don't. Orders from the county."
"They're sealing off the hollow." "The hollow?" I repeated. "Whole sector east of the creek," he said. "Too unstable? What about my house?" He didn't answer. The older deputy leaned in. "You Daniel Price?" I nodded. He lowered his mask for a second.
"Sheriff said if you show up, he wants you out of the area."
"Don't make him come find you." That was all I needed to hear. I drove past the next junction, pulled off behind a line of pine trees, and parked where they couldn't see. From there, a narrow service path cut through the woods and down toward the ridge. It used to be where kids hiked to watch fireworks on the 4th of July. Now it felt like a tunnel. Air thick, ground slick with condensation. The closer I got to the creek, the louder that hum became. Not mechanical anymore, not deep. It was higher now, like air moving fast through narrow space, vibrating the leaves. When I reached the ridge overlook, I saw it. Coldwater Hollow wasn't just venting gas. The land itself was breathing from above. I could see the pattern. The field behind my house, the creek bed, even the old mill foundation, all connected by a spiderweb of dark lines where the soil had sunk. Every few seconds a pulse rippled outward, lifting dust and grass like a heartbeat. The haze wasn't fog at all. It was vaporized earth, rising from dozens of small vents I hadn't known existed. And in the center of it all, my house was gone. A crater sat where it had been. The ground sunken inward, edges glowing faintly orange from heat. The air shimmered above it. I could see the black shape of the crawl space exposed like an open wound, its timbers splintered. Movement caught my eye. Down near the crater rim, 3 figures in hazmat suits were placing markers, carrying instruments. One of them was Jansen. Even from this distance, I could tell by his gait, slow, deliberate, right knee stiff from an old injury. He stopped, turned toward the ridge, and looked straight up at me. I waved. He didn't wave back. Then he motioned for the others to move back, and a 4th figure climbed out of the crater.
No suit, no mask.
Just jeans, a torn jacket, and bare feet. For a heartbeat, I thought I was hallucinating. The man was covered in mud, streaked with black residue, his hair matted to his skull. He stumbled, blinking at the light, and for a moment our eyes met. It was Beck. I shouted his name, but the wind swallowed it. Jansen lunged forward, shouting something I couldn't hear, but Beck just stood there, swaying. Then he turned toward the creek. The earth shifted beneath him, rippling outward from where he stood. The crater walls buckled. Jansen and the crew ran for the trucks. Beck didn't move. He raised one arm as if to steady himself, and the entire ridge groaned like a living thing. A column of vapor erupted from the ground, 10 feet high, white and seething. I dropped flat as the blast wave hit the trees. The air filled with grit, heat, and that awful metallic taste. When I looked again, the crater was collapsing inward. The ground folded like soft clay, pulling Beck's silhouette down in slow motion until he vanished completely. Then, as suddenly as it began, the wind stopped. Silence fell over the valley. The haze thinned, then drifted upward, dispersing into the pale sky. The hum was gone. Everything, sound, movement, life, just stopped. I stayed on that ridge until sunset, waiting for someone to emerge.
Nobody did.
When I finally walked back to my truck, The deputies were gone. The barricade still stood, but the vehicles had vanished. It was like they'd never been there. I drove west, away from town. By the time I reached the next county line, my phone buzzed again.
One message. Unknown number. It's sealed. No punctuation. No timestamp. For a while, I thought that was the end.
The county fenced off the hollow, called it an environmental containment zone. They issued a statement about ground instability and residual gas leaks. Nobody mentioned the Hollow Man, or the missing people, or Beck. I moved 3 towns over, rented a small apartment above a hardware store, and tried to forget, but forgetting doesn't work when the air shifts wrong. It started 2 weeks later, a faint vibration at night, like trucks on distant pavement, but there were no roads nearby. Then the smell, just barely noticeable at first, metallic at the edges of dawn.
And the dreams? I'd wake with mud on my hands, streaked across the sheets.
I kept the windows sealed, the vents taped, the floor swept clean, but every morning the same fine dust settled in the corners, grey, oily, faintly warm to the touch. Last night, the knocking came again. 3 slow thuds against the radiator pipes, spaced perfectly apart. This morning, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, no postmark, just folded paper inside an unmarked envelope. It was handwritten in block letters. You shouldn't have opened it. Below that, a small scrap of newspaper tape clipped to the page. The headline read, "Cold Water. Hollow reopening for environmental survey. Site to be re-evaluated by new development board." There was a date. Next week. I sat for a long time, reading and rereading the note, feeling the faint tremor beneath my feet. It wasn't imagination. It was the same steady pulse I'd felt that night before the house collapsed. Slow, patient, alive. If you've ever lived in a place long enough, you learn its rhythms. The sound of the train, the creak of the floor, the hum of the fridge. You learn what's natural. And when something new enters that rhythm, something foreign, you don't need to see it. You just know I've started hearing it again now, that same pressure under the ground, moving through the pipes.
I can't go back to Coldwater Hollow, but I don't think it matters.
Whatever they sealed down there doesn't stay where it's put. The legends got one thing wrong. The Hollow Man wasn't a person. It was a system, a containment built too deep, forgotten too long. People didn't disappear because he took them.
They disappeared because they listened to the knocks, because they answered. The walls are shaking again as I write this.
3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. It's not even subtle now. It wants me to know it's here. Maybe Tyler's still alive somewhere. Maybe Jansen's crew managed to cover it for good. But I doubt it. You can't bury something that's part of the land itself. If anyone finds this, and you live anywhere near Coldwater Hollow, if you smell that metallic air, or hear those knocks through your vents, don't wait.
Don't go outside.
Don't dig. Whatever's breathing under there has found a way to the surface again, and this time it's not waiting for permission.